Welcome to Magnify Your Message. Inspiration magnified.
I'm not bashing anybody in the educational system. It's a hard job to have. I understand the frustration, but their frustration can't be our children's collateral damage, right?
Welcome back to Magnify Your Message, the podcast where we amplify the voices and stories of people making a real impact in the world. And trust me, today's guest is doing exactly that. If you've ever felt like traditional education isn't built for every child, you're not alone. And today, we're talking to someone who not only knows that struggle firsthand, but has dedicated her life to transforming the way that we approach learning. I am delighted to introduce Mary Reisenbeck. She's an innovative educator, homeschool consultant, and fierce advocate for kids who learn differently. Inspired by her own son's challenges with dyslexia, Mary became a pioneer in alternative education, developing groundbreaking methods to engage students across all learning spectrums. So, whether you're a parent, an educator, or someone who just believes that every child deserves an education tailored to their unique brilliance, you do not want to miss today's conversation. So, grab a notebook, get ready for some eye opening insights, and let's dive in with Mary Reisenbeck. I am so excited to introduce you to today's guest, Mary Reisenbeck. Mary, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Mary, share with the people listening, who are you? What is it that you provide in the world?
Well, my name is Mary Reisenbeck, and I am a homeschool parent liaison, as well as an IEP advocate, and that's an individualized educational plan for children that have different learning differences and on different learning spectrums.
Oh, this is fascinating. So, what's your background and how did you get into this?
Well, it started almost 25 years ago with the birth of my children, both my son and daughter. I noticed at an early age that they were not reading at level and they were behind in certain areas, but advanced in other areas. And I found out that they both had dyslexia and dysgraphia, but also dyscalculia. And those things are dyslexia is a reading issue. Dysgraphia is a writing issue. It's a fine motor skill issue. And then dyscalculia is basically dyslexia for math. It's where you really don't have a lot of skills with directions or telling time. So it also goes beyond just, computing different facts. And I found out through testing that they were twice exceptional. That means that they were highly gifted in other areas, but yet learning disabled. And so when they entered the school system, I knew that I had to make sure that their needs were going to be met and that, that they were going to be treated correctly. Because when you're different, especially 25 years ago in the classroom, it was pointed out and self-esteem tends to go low because I also had ADHD as a kid. My husband suffered from dyslexia as well. And so we remembered our experiences growing up. And so I didn't want them to experience that. So I ended up getting hired at their school. And I did find kind of an outside of the box private school. It was a performing arts school and it had a Montessori base to it, which I really liked. And I got hired as a theater teacher and as an aide. So I was inside the classroom. I was there every day. And so I was able to advocate for them. So through that advocacy, they got tested further. And I actually helped my colleagues understand something that was not understood in detail back then, especially. And so I went on to be hired as a lead teacher for the elementary department. And then I continued with my theater. Everything was going well. I got them an individual educational plan. So in the elementary years, things went well. Everybody was on the same page. Things started changing in middle school and high school. Their IEP was not taken seriously anymore because they are so intelligent and they have a high IQ. They were kind of accused of being lazy or not trying, but in reality, their individual needs in the classroom, the modifications and accommodations were simply not being met. And so what I saw was self-esteem plummet to dangerous levels, and each child manifests them differently, but it was the same self-esteem drop for the same reasons, that they were really getting kind of pointed out in the classroom. And when a teacher does that and inside the classroom, then peers tend to align with the teacher. So then friendships started suffering. So I decided to take the grand leap into homeschooling. And I had dabbled in it a little bit earlier in between middle school, elementary and middle school, but I did it through the district. This time I did it privately. And so with that, a lot of great success came out of that, because I got to really just, first of all, build the self-esteem back first, because that was number one thing. So find those things that they were passionate about and talented in. At this point in time, they were in high school. So my daughter was entering sophomore year and my son was entering his senior year. And so my son was great in the performing arts. So he got a job actually at the local theater in town, as well as did schoolwork at home. And he went to different activities that the homeschooling program had for the kids. Same with my daughter. She's very talented in art, all types of art. So she ended up going to college, the community college in town, taking classes and really building that skill as well. They both graduated high school, and a lot of times one of the number one myths are, if you homeschool your child, no college will take them. And that's absolutely a big myth, because my son was accepted into a prestigious performing arts college in Los Angeles. And my daughter was accepted into a prestigious art college in Laguna Beach. They both graduated, got their bachelor's degrees, and now they are very successful adults in their field. So I'm
That's
very
amazing.
proud. Yeah.
One of the things I was wondering is, how many other students do you think exist who have a similar type of hurdle or challenge that they're dealing with, that they have different abilities than what standards-based education might teach to?
Well, you'd be surprised, because being in the classroom for many years, because I'm still currently in the classroom, but I'm in the classroom on a homeschooling spectrum. We do a homeschool enrichment classes, but I would say it's a lot more than what people recognize, because a lot of these kids don't go and get tested through the district. So they just get kind of labeled, disruptive, or, not paying attention, or troublemaker, or class clown, or, too social. So like you'll get some of those normal labels. And reality, they have a different spectrum of learning. They just learn differently. And what I found as I moved into the homeschooling world, and how that homeschooling world has now exploded into a real different, fun, revolutionary feel to it. You see parents now kind of gravitating to that individualized learning, because that way the labels actually get taken away, and you're focusing on, their talents, their passions. You're making learning a lot of fun. And in that process, now the socialization, that was a big myth and all that other stuff. The homeschooling community has come together in such a big, fantastic community way that socialization is taken care of, but yet the needs of the individual and the way that they go on their academic journey is very much tailored to them, which is Wonderful. So to answer your question, more than you would know on paper.
Makes good sense. And there's, boy, this is fascinating. There's so many questions. When you talked about the dip in morale and self-esteem, as well as the ability, the learning progress that your kids were making as they went up to middle school and high school, do you think it was because you weren't there advocating for them and it's challenging for, I mean, heck, let's face it, sometimes as an adult it's hard to advocate for yourself. I can't imagine a middle schooler having the wherewithal to do that. Do you think it's because you weren't advocating it for them? Do you think the type of quote normal education, whether it's standards based or whatever that is so inculcated in the school systems? Or do you think what do you think, why specifically did the kids have so much more trouble as they got on out of the school where you were located?
Well, to be honest with you, I was always just a very firm advocate for them. So I was always kind of, well, in their face a little bit about it. I would be very hands-on about it. I did want my children to learn to advocate for themselves, but during that time period, it is very difficult because they don't want to be different. They want to be exactly like everybody else. They want to be the status quo. They want to blend in. So to raise your hand and say, well, I have the
Right.
accommodations and modification, that's like, oh, wow, there's a spotlight on me. I'm different. Now you can, either pick at me or bother me in any way you want. So they don't want to. They end up doing it very nicely when they become a young adult. But during that real period of going through puberty and all that stuff that you're going through, the last thing in the world is you want to stand up and put
Right,
your
in
fist
any
on the
way.
table and say, unfair, you're breaking the FAPE Act. You know what I mean? But what I found is that the people, when I was early on in the elementary department, I'm kind of like, a powerful personality anyway. Even though I was the advocate then, they were willing to listen to me and actually learn from me. And when they went to different teachers with this higher, I guess, expectation of whatever that looks like for them, it didn't include their IEP because truly the backlash I was getting was they were not, this was a farce, that this was just
Mm,
ridiculous. And it did have a lot to do with them being twice exceptional because they are very intelligent. So you can sit down and have a very above board conversation with them, but to say, sit down with a traditional pencil and paper and write it out, they can't do it. They would need
understood.
software to be able to take that, you talk at types or whatever it was at those times. Now it's got beautiful software that you can use with no problem. But in those days, it was still coming together. It was still working itself out. But to have those accommodations and modifications, to be able to use that for homework purposes or for in-class purposes was things that they were just not willing to do for them because they thought
Right.
they were just being lazy and obnoxious.
Mary, what about the kids who don't even know that such a thing as an IEP exists and their parents have no idea? Possibly the real urban schools where it's just they're even more taxed, even more time and attention and energy and resource deficient. And there's zero information or knowledge or anything about that. What do these kids, what fate bestows them when they've just been determined to be a bad student?
Well, it's also the teachers being overwhelmed and shuffling them forward, shuffling them along,
Right.
Oh, I can't
Pass
wait to
them.
get Jimmy out of my class.
Yep.
Okay, so like I can't wait to just, shuffle them up to and it's, I'm not bashing anybody in the educational system. It's a hard job to have, and especially when you have no backup or no support, which it feels like that. And then some people that don't even that have never taught a day in their lives coming down and having rules and regulations that you have to do inside your classroom before you're even teaching core subject matters. So I understand the frustration, but their frustration can't be our children's collateral damage, right? So I've always been someone that if a parent sees something and notices something, because nobody knows their child better than their parents, they go to the district and they have to initiate, I want my child tested. Now, a teacher might say, hey, Sally has some reading issues. You might want to get him tested through the district. Here's how you do that. That doesn't always happen. That doesn't always happen because a lot of times these classrooms are so filled up, the teacher might even miss it because and just label it as bad behavior or just label it as lazy because they don't have the time to really go, oh, look at that handwriting. It has a very specific feel to it. And a lot of
Right.
these educators are not actually schooled in what different learning differences look like in the classroom too.
It's such
So
a
they don't even know.
conundrum, isn't it?
They don't even know, right?
Right. I mean, it makes good sense. How do you find that out when there's like where does something like that fall on the list of priorities? And I don't mean to diminish anything. My mother was a lifelong educator, started as a substitute teacher, worked her way up to central office admin, director of curriculum instruction, assistant superintendent, became a university professor teaching teachers.
Right.
I have many dear friends who became teachers. No one goes into education because of the money. They go into education because they want to make a difference.
Right.
And yet they're so often hamstrung by what they must teach and what the quotas and things like this. And that when you bring up something like knowing what to look for in penmanship that might be an indicator that someone has a particular kind of brain function requiring a particular kind of adaptive learning.
Absolutely.
It just, where does that fall on the hierarchical, trying to keep kids from hurting themselves or each other? And there's studies this year that came out about 8-year-olds having suicidal ideation. It's the enormity of the problems that educators and those in your line of work are facing. It's just it's overwhelming. I acknowledge you all. There are no easy solutions here. And
Well,
as you present homeschooling as one of them and IEPs as one of them, I think about I those who were already so taxed, where do they come up with it? I mean, teachers I know of that that buy all the arts and crafts themselves for their classroom because they can't
100%.
they're not funded, or they stay after to take care of kids on their own time, and it's just how do we solve these problems that education
Well, I
has there?
actually have a whole game plan to do that.
Woo! Okay. Talk,
I
please.
wrote a book called Take Charge of Your Child's Education. And basically that is, it's not Wuthering Heights or anything, but it is kind of a blueprint for a parent that is kind of waffling and unsure of kind of doing individualized journey, an educational journey. And if they want homeschooling or different alternatives of learning. I have different alternatives of way of learning, like I have Waldorf, I have Montessori. There's other different ways to have a child learn inside the book. But what's happening for both families and educators is there's this rumbling of an educational revolution, and it really is coming from the homeschooling community. And what I've done is I've created a little off spin of my business, of my consulting, and I'm back in the classroom with a homeschool enrichment center. And basically I am my own business. And what's so neat about that is I do core subjects through academic-based theater. And so I write these plays that are different. Like I have ancient Egyptians. And so I do this entire play, but it's a musical. And so a lot of the songs have all of the information, and they're catchy songs. And then at the end of the 16 weeks, we put on a full production of everything they learned in that history class. And we do backdrops, costumes, set pieces. And so the parents get a full understanding of interactive learning. And so you can actually look into those different methods of learning. And if you're at a homeschool enrichment center, it kind of moves like a school. You would maybe from afar think it was a school, but really it's just a lot of passionate educators that have walked out of the classroom to come in and help these homeschooling families. And as for a homeschooling family, you can pick these classes a la carte, like a college, like almost like a college courses. And you can really make the schedule as flexible as you want. And that is really what I see education kind of doing. Really, really coming together as a community, of course, having great educators there available, because, I can't teach algebra and I don't want to teach algebra, but I have many different educators now around me that I can now have my child take a class from one of them. We have online teachers that are really great that you can supplement with as well. So you can turn your child's educational journey into a fun, fantastic learning experience. Because what I was finding with my children was that learning was becoming a bad name, that like going to school became a tummy ache, that all of a sudden, and these weren't fake illnesses, these were anxiety-driven illnesses. Those evaporated. Community friendships came together. My daughter, who's now 10, going to be 11 in a few weeks, has never known anything different but homeschooling. And she has flourished. She has dyslexia. She has dyscalculia. And she is now reading at her grade level. And her math is just one grade level behind. And that is such an accomplishment from when my son and daughter were several years behind when it came to reading and math and writing. Now, they could do everything orally, college, college material orally, but having those mastered took longer through the district because of the pressure and the labeling and the lack of support. That is what made their self-esteem plummet. And that's why we see a lot of these, depression, suicide, and the family members start fighting with each other. And all of a sudden you come home and now it's a big argument about what homework you have to do and what test you failed and how you have to have now hours and more of this and that. You can make this flexible where you're not taxing your child and where learning becomes intrinsic and natural.
Beautiful. So, Mary, what advice would you give to parents, grandparents, relatives, friends of children who are struggling in school right now? What can they personally do to take matters into their own hands?
Trust your instinct. Trust your instinct. If you feel like there is something more than not having enough time to do your homework or being careless with your homework or not studying for your spelling test, if you feel that your child is coming home kind of sad, not telling you about their day, hiding things from you, like hiding tests, or you're seeing like crumpled homework papers underneath, the bed, and you become frustrated with this, don't be frustrated. These are all signs that there has to be a different approach. And it doesn't mean that your child is intentionally trying to do any of this on purpose. It just means that you can take different avenues, get them tested by the district. Now, if you want to homeschool, you still have a right to have your child tested through the district free. And I always recommend that 100%, that you pay taxes, that's your right. And so then you can take that and you have many different options. So if you want to continue with public school, you certainly can. If you're living in California and you want to attempt homeschooling, but you want to continue with the district's IEP, you can do that through a charter. If you want to now move over to private homeschooling, you can do that, and you can roll over your IEP into a special education plan. That's kind of a homeschooling, AKA IEP. And you can talk to somebody like me, and we can guide you through that process as well. Also, a lot of people don't know about the different alternatives to learning. They don't know that there's, Montessori that might actually suit them better, or a Waldorf that might suit them better. I had a big meeting with a school that it's student led. It's called Acton Academy, and it's student led. And so there's many different avenues, but don't be afraid to voice your opinions. Okay. And if you feel that your child's being overlooked or has been labeled a certain way, dig deeper and find out if there's an educational need here that is not being met.
Fantastic. That it just starting so simply by trusting your instincts is
100%.
such a beautiful, empowering place to leave people today. Mary, thank you. Where can
Thank you.
people learn more about you and the work that you do?
You can go to my website, maryreisenbeck.com. And you can also see me on Facebook and Instagram. I go by Mary Reisenbeck, so I'm pretty easy.
Mary, thank you for shining a light on this. It's so important, not just to the individual families, but for the future of our nation and world.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for taking the time to be here today.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure, Cheryl.
And that brings us to the end of today's episode of the Magnify Your Message podcast. I don't know about you, but I am so inspired by Mary's passion, her insights, and the way that she's transforming education for kids who think and learn differently. If today's episode resonated with you, if you're a parent, an educator, or someone who believes in the power of tailored learning, then take this as your sign to trust your instincts, ask the tough questions, and explore new possibilities for education. Until next time, keep using your voice, sharing your message, and making an impact. I'll see you on the next episode. If you enjoyed this, please like, subscribe, and share this episode with everyone that you feel it would benefit. Thank you in advance. And when you're ready to share your story and your work with the world, I can help. Visit CherylHunter.com to learn how. I am Cheryl Hunter, and until next time, know that your message has the power to change the world.